Chapter 3 of the Story of a Soul. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anne Boulay. The Story of a Soul, the Autobiography of Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. Translated by Thomas Taylor. Chapter 3. Pauline enters the Carmel. I was 8½ when Léonie left school, and I took her place at the Benedictine Abbey in Lisieux. The girls of my class were all older than myself. One of them was 14, and, though not clever, she knew how to impose on the little ones. Seeing me so young, nearly always first in class, and a favourite with all the nuns, she was jealous, and used to pay me out in 1,000 ways. Naturally timid and sensitive, I did not know how to defend myself, and could only cry in silence. Céline and my elder sisters did not know my grief, and, not being advanced enough in virtue to rise above these troubles, I suffered considerably. Every evening I went home, and then my spirits rose. I would climb onto Papa's knee, telling him what marks I had, and his caresses made me forget all my troubles. With what delight I announced the result of my first essay, for I won the maximum number of marks. In reward I received a silver coin which I put in my money box for the poor, and nearly every Thursday I was able to increase the fund. Indeed, to be spoilt was a real necessity for me. The little flower had need to strike its tender roots deeper and deeper into the dearly loved garden of home, for nowhere else could it find the nourishment it required. Thursday was a holiday, but it was not like the holidays I had under Pauline, which I generally spent upstairs with Papa. Not knowing how to play like other children, I felt myself a dull companion. I tried my best to do as the others did, but without success. After Céline, who was, so to say, indispensable to me, I sought the company of my little cousin Marie, because she left me free to choose the games I liked best. We were already closely united in heart and will, as if God were showing us in advance how one day in the Carmel we should embrace the same religious life. Footnote: Marie Guérin entered the Carmel at Lisieux on August 15, 1895, and took the name of Sister Mary of the Eucharist. She died on April 14, 1905, aged 34. End footnote. Very often, at my uncle's house, we used to play at being two austere hermits, with only a poor hut, and a little patch of corn, and a garden in which to grow a few vegetables. Our life was spent in continual contemplation, one praying while the other engaged in active duties. All was done with religious gravity and decorum. If we went out, the make-believe continued even in the street. The two hermits would say the rosary, using their fingers to count on, so as not to display their devotion before those who might scoff. One day, however, the hermit Thérèse forgot herself. Before eating a cake given her for lunch, she made a large sign of the cross, and some worldly folk did not repress a smile. We were so bent on always doing the same thing that sometimes we carried it too far. Endeavouring one evening, on our way home from school, to imitate the modest demeanour of the hermits, I said to Marie, "Lead me, I am going to shut my eyes." "So am I," she answered. Being on the pavement we were in no fear of vehicles, and for a short while all went well, and we enjoyed walking with our eyes shut. But presently we both fell over some boxes standing at a shop door, and knocked them down. The shopkeeper came out in a rage to replace them, but the would-be blind pair picked themselves up and ran off as fast as they could, with eyes wide open. Then the hermits had to listen to a well-deserved scolding from Jeanne, the maid, who seemed as vexed as the shopkeeper. I have not yet told you how Céline and I altered when we came to Lisieux. She had now become the little romp, full of mischief, while Thérèse had turned into a very quiet little girl, far too much inclined to tears. I needed a champion, and who can say how courageously my dear little sister played that part? We used to enjoy making each other little presents, for, at that age, the simplicity of our hearts was unspoiled. Like the spring flowers they unfolded, glad to receive the morning dew, while the same soft breezes swayed their petals. Yes, our joys were mutual. I felt this especially on the happy day of Céline's first communion. I was only 7 years old, and had not yet begun school at the Abbey. How sweet is the remembrance of her preparation! Every evening during its last weeks my sisters talked to her of the great event. I listened, eager to prepare myself too, and my heart swelled with grief when I was told to go away because I was still too young. I thought that 4 years was not too long to spend in making ready to receive our dear Lord. One evening I heard someone say to my happy little sister, "From the time of your first communion you must begin an entirely new life." At once I made a resolution not to wait till the time of my first communion, but to begin with Céline. During her retreat she remained as a boarder at the Abbey, and it seemed to me she was away a long time, but at last the happy day came. What a delightful impression it has left on my mind! It was like a foretaste of my own first communion. How many graces I received that day! I look on it as one of the most beautiful of my life. I have gone back a little in order to recall these happy memories, but now I must tell you of the mournful parting which crushed my heart when our Lord took from me my little mother whom I loved so dearly. I told her once that I would like to go away with her to a far-off desert. She replied that it was her wish too, but that she was waiting till I was big enough to set out. This impossible promise I took in earnest, and what was my grief when I heard Pauline talking to Marie about soon entering the Carmel! I did not know the Carmel, but I knew that she was leaving me to enter a convent, and that she would not wait for me. How can I describe the anguish I suffered? In a flash I saw my life spread out before me as it really is, full of sufferings and frequent partings, and I shed bitter tears. At that time I did not know the joy of sacrifice. I was weak, so weak that I look on it as a great grace that I was able to bear such a trial, one seemingly so much beyond my strength, and yet live. I shall never forget how tenderly my little mother consoled me, while explaining the religious life. Then one evening, when I was thinking over the picture she had drawn, I felt that the Carmel was the desert where God wished me also to hide. I felt this so strongly that I had not the least doubt about it, nor was it a childish dream, but the certainty of a divine call. This impression, which I cannot properly describe, left me with a feeling of great inward peace. Next day I confided my desires to Pauline. They seemed to her as a proof of God's will, and she promised to take me soon to the Carmel, to see the Mother Prioress and to tell her my secret. This solemn visit was fixed for a certain Sunday, and great was my embarrassment on hearing that my cousin Marie, who was still young enough to be allowed to see the Carmelites, was to come with us. Footnote: with the Carmelites the grating is only open for near relatives and very young children. Editor. End footnote. I had to contrive a means of being alone with the Reverend Mother, and this is what I planned. I told Marie that, as we were to have the great privilege of seeing her, we must be very good and polite, and tell her our little secrets, and in order to do that, we must go out of the room in turns. Though she did not quite like it, because she had no secrets to confide, Marie took me at my word, and so I was able to be alone with you, dear Mother. You listened to my great disclosure, and believed in my vocation, but you told me that postulants were not received at the age of 9, and that I must wait till I was 16. In spite of my ardent desire to enter with Pauline and make my first communion on her clothing day, I had to be resigned. At last the 2nd of October came, a day of tears, but also of blessings, when our Lord gathered the first of His flowers, the chosen flower who, later on, was to become the mother of her sisters. Footnote: Pauline has several times been prioress of the Carmel of Lisieux, and in 1909 again succeeded to that office on the death of the young and saintly Mother Mary of St. Angelus of the Child Jesus. Editor. End footnote. Whilst Papa, with my uncle and Marie, climbed the mountain of Carmel to offer his first sacrifice, my aunt took me to Mass with my sisters and cousins. We were bathed in tears, and people gazed at us in astonishment when we entered the church, but that did not stop our crying. I even wondered how the sun could go on shining. Perhaps, dear Mother, you think I exaggerate my grief a little. I confess that this parting ought not to have upset me so much, but my soul was yet far from mature, and I had to pass through many trials before reaching the haven of peace, before tasting the delicious fruits of perfect love and of complete abandonment to God's will. In the afternoon of that